Elderplan grows a new currency in Brooklyn. Frank Voolo is sitting in his Pontiac outside the Key supermarket in the Sheep's Head Bay section of Brooklyn. It's cold, with a faint whiff of salt in the air, and Voolo looks hale and dapper in his 1940s mustache and plaid wool hat. He doesn't seem to be doing much, but he's helping to bring about fundamental change in the way the nation thinks about medical care. Voolo came up the hard way, a political prisoner in Shanghai during World War II, a farm laborer in Brooklyn, which had farms until the 1950s, a dock worker in Manhattan. He owned a dry cleaning shop and finally ended up with a union job running a freight elevator before he retired. Voolo has every right to sit back and enjoy his pension. But he can't. If I keep moving, I feel like I did when I was in the Marines, he says. If I sit down, I'm a dead duck. Voolo's need to keep moving has become the answer to Etta Goldsmith's need for help. Goldsmith lives with her husband in an apartment building nearby, and life has been a struggle. Her husband is very ill, and she's battling physical ailments of her own. Her eyes are going bad, and simple tasks like shopping pose a major challenge. So every Thursday, Voolo picks up Goldsmith at her apartment, loads her shopping cart into the backseat, and drives the mile or so to the supermarket. On this particular day, Goldsmith seems happily in her element as she scrutinizes the tomatoes like a customs agent and scans the bakery shelf for bargains. I had a hard time, she confides, fishing coupons out of a rumpled envelope in the checkout line. She doesn't care to elaborate. But the first time Voolo took her shopping, she insisted he take a pen in return. If it weren't for you, I thought I'd be lost, she told him one day. Voolo and Goldsmith aren't old friends. They aren't even neighbors. Instead, they are both members of Elderplan, a health maintenance organization, HMO, for seniors in Brooklyn. Elderplan goes far beyond the typical HMO in its approach to care and need. Most HMOs mimic the conventional medical system in treating members as consumers of expert services, though at somewhat lower prices. Elderplan goes much further and enlists members as participants in one another's care, and their own. It does this through a time bank, which is called member-to-member. When Voolo drives Goldsmith to the supermarket or helps in some other way, Goldsmith has been dropping hints about a ride to the dentist. Voolo gets a credit in the time bank. He can then use this credit to get help from another member, should he need it somewhere down the line. If he accumulates enough of these time dollars, he can use them to pay one of his quarterly HMO premiums. Tapping a patient pool ability. The concept is as simple as the old neighborhood babysitting club. But its impact on Elderplan has been enormous. Time dollars have tapped a latent pool of talent in Elderplan's own membership, turning passive recipients of care into producers and providers. These members tend to stay more healthy because they are active and needed. The concept has expanded the care the HMO can offer and has changed an insurance relationship into a familiar one. It is not often that people volunteer at their insurance companies, notes Derek Raphael, who founded the member-to-member program. The irony is that time dollars, despite the name, don't work as monetary incentive. Rather, the concept touches a side of people that doesn't respond to money. For me, the credits don't mean nothing at all, Voolo says, in the inflections of his native Italy. It's my pleasure, my enjoyment, if I can help somebody in need. When Elderplan was founded in 1985, health maintenance organizations were widely regarded as a disappointment. They were originally promoted as a way to control the medical system's voracious appetite for money. Instead, HMOs have mainly reaffirmed the limits of monetary incentives and management economies in dealing with human needs. HMOs entered the American medical scene in a big way during the 1970s. In the previous decade, Lyndon Johnson had finally overcome the opposition of the American Medical Association in pushing through the Medicare program for the elderly. With the exception of the Japanese and Germans after World War II, few losers have prospered so well. The sudden infusion of public monies fed an escalation in medical costs, which went up 7 to 10 times the rate of inflation. National expenditures on medical care jumped from 2% to over 11% of the whole economy. Medical specialties proliferated. The more specialists who worked on a patient, the more separate times the government could be billed. Anesthesiologists and radiologists fared especially well, while family doctors and general practitioners came to be seen almost as a form of unskilled labor. And meanwhile, the Medicare program gave rise to a vast new paperwork industry to keep records and process claims. H. Ross Perot, the self-made millionaire and passionate defender of free enterprise, made his fortune setting up this record-keeping system. While the industry prospered, the government and medical consumers were going broke. America's medical system had become twice as expensive as Canada's, while providing nowhere near the coverage. The hemorrhage of taxpayer dollars finally prompted the government to action, and the result was a new panacea, the HMO. The basic problem, said the experts, is that doctors make more money the more treatment they provide. Their economic interest lies in the direction of disease and high-tech treatment, rather than prevention and better health. The HMO was intended to change this perverse economics in a fundamental way. Members pay a flat premium, no matter how much treatment they receive. From the doctor's standpoint, the best patient then becomes a healthy patient. Doctors do better when the patient needs less attention. HMOs have improved on fee-for-service medicine, but not as much as hoped. Doctors found that keeping patients healthy is just one way to boost returns. An easier way is to establish layers of red tape before members can get to a hospital. As a result, HMOs often reject those who most need to be members. On top of that, HMOs found that their investments in prevention don't really pay monetarily, since members often drop out and take their good health someplace else. However, the real problem is more basic than the screening policies. Many members seek care at hospitals because it is the only kind their insurance pays for. The elderly are especially prone to use hospitals as temporary nursing homes. Even when they really have no acute need, they often can't be discharged because there is no one to take care of them at home. The lack of daily care is often the source of their illness in the first place. Doctoring up the HMOs, a group of medical care reformers got to pondering this problem, and the result was the social HMO. The SHMO, as it's called, simply adds social services to the HMO's medical insurance, to cut down on hospital use and help seniors maintain themselves at home. This is the concept behind Elderplan. Through some adept bureaucratic footwork in Washington, Elderplan became one of only 4 experimental SHMOs in the country under legislation enacted in 1985. It turned out, however, that the SHMO is less a breakthrough than it first appeared. Home care and social services take money, too much more than is available from Medicare and other sources. So the cash bind simply got transferred to a new, social service front. An elderly member who needs significant support at home, for example, quickly runs through his or her yearly allotment. Plus, the social support is limited in the first place. An Elderplan member can visit a psychologist 15 times, for example, but mainly for drugs and what is called, in medical circles, management. There's not much money for counseling, says Raphael. Raphael and others at Elderplan realized they were confronting more than just a glitch in medical strategy. Somehow, the functions of family and community life, taking seniors to the doctor, making sure they have companionship and food in the refrigerator, were being dumped in their laps. There is not enough money in America to buy that kind of attention and care. So the task for an organization like Elderplan becomes much larger than medical experts ever imagined. Beyond finding new sources of money, and beyond getting retirees to watch their diets, Elderplan had to find a way to replicate the old informal systems of care. In other words, it had to become a social HMO in the root sense of the word, involving allies and confederates. $10 workers pick up on this intuitively. Making like a family, Frank Vuolo says. The quiet beginnings of a revolution, Elderplan headquarters seems an unlikely place to start a social revolution. Until a recent move, the office occupied part of the second floor of a nondescript bank building in the Borough Park section of Brooklyn. The neighborhood is an Orthodox Jewish enclave, where the men wear yarmulkes and austere black suits without ties, and shops sell Hebrew books and kosher foods. Except for the blasting horns and the electronics products in the shop windows, life here doesn't seem to have changed much over the last 50 years. Yet this setting in a traditional culture is appropriate for a $10 program. Despite the immediate neighborhood, Elderplan members are a diverse group: Jamaican, Irish, Italian, Afro-American, Jewish, virtually the entire span of Brooklyn's ethnic melange. One thing they share is memories of families and neighborhoods where people looked out for one another. $10 participants talk about a Brooklyn that barely exists anymore. Ray Hughes, a retired merchant seaman, recalls how people pulled together during the Depression. We washed windows, we beat trucks, but we never thought of using the money for ourselves, he says. We just came home and put it on the table. Rebecca Peters recalls the cohesion of the immigrant world. A small, articulate woman who wears her hair in a braided bun, Peters came to Brooklyn from Germany in the 1920s, when her family fled from Hitler and the rising anti-Semitism there. People brought over their families and friends, and they lived in a pretty tight circle, Peters says. These circles were called Landsmannschaften, and they provided a community of care to strangers in the new land. One could always go to the synagogue. In the basement, the Landsmannschaften would meet. You could always find a family to take you home if you needed a meal. Peters has been an idealist for most of her life. She married a black man in the 1940s, and in the 1950s, she was the plaintiff in a lawsuit that challenged, successfully, a McCarthy-era loyalty oath for public housing tenants. Later, she helped to run an interracial summer camp that was attacked by local residents. But like many Elderplan members, volunteer work as such didn't appeal to her until now. I have never done anything like this before, although people would come to me with their problems, she says. Perhaps more typical is Dorothy Kochal, a Brooklyn housewife who had never worked outside the home and who didn't think she had anything to offer. But then her husband died, and she started losing friends to death as well. Her children live close by, but, as she puts it tactfully, they have their own lives. Feeling a need for human contact, she signed up for the member-to-member program. A friend to look forward to is important. Her first case was an old couple who were entitled to home health care from the city, but wouldn't take it because they didn't want welfare. Gochal was nervous at the start. I didn't think I would like it, she says. What was I going to talk about? As the three got to know one another, the situation became more comfortable. I did nothing, Gochal says. I sat and watched soap operas, like a friend. They didn't have a circle of friends they could call on. It may seem a small thing, but a friend to look forward to can provide a big boost to seniors who live isolated in their homes. In many cases, it makes the difference between normal functioning and serious illness or a nursing home. This is especially true when members like Frank Vuolo help other members deal with the outside world. When people live alone, the first things they have trouble with are things outside the house: shopping, the doctor, getting the laundry done, says Mashi Black, coordinator of the member-to-member program. But if they don't get proper food or medical care, they get sicker and sicker and sicker very quickly. The member-to-member program started 3 years ago from the scratch. Today, there are over 100 time-dollar workers, out of some 5,200 members overall. These have reported over 13,000 hours of helping work, and since many hours go unreported, the actual total is a great deal more. Home care workers cost at least $10 an hour in New York, so the member-to-member program has supplied well over $130,000 worth of caring work. At this rate, the program has more than paid for itself. But it is far more than a way to provide home care on the cheap. The time-dollar structure adds dimensions of care that professionals couldn't supply, even if money were available. And it changes the concept of health from a product to be consumed to an activity to be pursued. For one thing, members seem more willing to ask for help when the help comes from peers. The reluctance of seniors to admit their needs is a major problem in the social service field. Some would rather live in dirty clothes than acknowledge that they are too feeble to go to the laundromat. Pride is part of it. Many Elderplan members grew up in the Depression, when people learned to tough it out, and they aren't about to cry on the shoulder of some social worker. Seniors prefer peers as confidants, but more, seniors just don't want to deal with people they don't know, especially in their homes. When a couple take care of one another, they get used to that routine, Gochal says. They make their bed a certain way, put the food in the refrigerator a certain way. Somebody else does it differently, so they reject it. The age difference between social workers and seniors only makes the problem worse. Imagine what it's like to have to admit incontinence to a city worker young enough to be a grandchild. They don't want to talk to some young girl in her 30s about the death of their husbands, Gochal says. Most psychologists in the field are men. For women, that's a turn-off. They think of them as grandsons. Gochal can understand such problems because she lives with them herself. She also understands why many seniors don't want to be a burden to their children, even when they live close by. The relationship may be strained. Years of emotional baggage can complicate the simplest act. Or else the parent senses where he or she stands in the new hierarchy of things. It's easier to ask me for a favor than to ask a son-in-law or daughter-in-law, Gochal says. With them, it's a big production. They have to take time off from work. If they have to sit in the doctor's office for more than 5 minutes, it's a calamity. One of Gochal's clients had a lot of pent-up anger. It turned out she just needed someone to talk to. The family didn't want to hear the stories, because they've heard them so many times. But I'm fascinated, Gochal said. These people get a new sense of being alive. Elder partners, as they are called, can enter their clients' lives because they approach them not as professionals but as friends. Avis Rhodes is an example. A retired psychiatric nurse from Jamaica, she has the lyric inflections of the Caribbean, and the knowing manner of one who can be trusted with secrets. Rhodes's first elder partner was a woman who was strapped into a wheelchair at a nursing home. Over 500,000 old people are restrained in beds and wheelchairs every day. Rhodes eased her way into the woman's trust, bringing her fresh bread and a Jewish newspaper, and chatting about current events. Gradually, the woman opened up, and soon she was able to go home. Rhodes continued to visit until the woman died a year later. A niece said she only came to the house while Rhodes was there, because then her aunt was on good behavior. I looked on her more as a friend, Rhodes says. Her current partner is a woman named Wilma, who stays at a nursing home near the boardwalk on Coney Island. Wilma is of Hungarian descent. She was widowed at 39 and lived with her son until he moved to Florida. As is often the case, her first weeks in the nursing home were not happy. She insisted on wearing a badge to separate herself from the other members. It read, "Hi, my name is Wilma. I like to do volunteer work." A staff person at the home says Wilma was confused and aggressive. Wilma still wears the badge. And she still refers to her fellow residents as the elderly people. But she has become settled and almost cordial since Rhodes started to visit. Though she offers detailed critiques of the menu, she concedes the place is very clean. She brightens noticeably when Rhodes appears. "Anything I need, she is right here," she says, almost as though it is a personal accomplishment. She is a very good friend. Helpers like Rhodes can't be bought. They have time to sit and listen, no clock is ticking, no caseload lies ahead. Seniors trust them like friends with intimate life details, such as taking care of bills. Some elder helpers go to extraordinary lengths. One scoured Brooklyn for a synagogue without front steps so that another member, who was confined to a wheelchair, could attend services. The latter was so thrilled, he was up and dressed hours before it was time to go. Elderplan restores self-esteem and provides work. The extra dimension of care probably isn't the greatest benefit of the $10 program. Rather, it's the opportunity that members like Gochal have to feel useful and needed. This begins to change the role of the HMO fundamentally. Rather than merely provide psychiatrists to restore their members' self-esteem, Elderplan also provides work that helps members feel worthy of self-esteem. Seniors in America don't have much chance to feel useful and important. Many are separated from their grandchildren, and so are deprived of an opportunity to play a role in their lives, beyond sending gifts for birthdays and at holidays. They don't have work or an active social role to boost their sense of worth. Even the things that are supposed to make seniors feel good, often do the opposite. A sobering study at the London School of Economics looked at what happens when adults visit their aging parents. The adult child generally came away feeling better about himself or herself, the study found, but the parent came away feeling worse. The reason is very simple, though it is one people seldom stop to think about. The children would bring news of all the good things in their lives, the promotions, the acclaim, the travel abroad. They were saying in effect, "Look, mommy and daddy. See what I have done." They were trying to give pleasure and show that they had, finally, lived up to their parents' expectations. It was a combination of show and tell and report card time. The parents listened dutifully and maybe even said something like, "That's interesting." That enabled the child to come away feeling better. But the aging parent wasn't feeling better. Listening to the list of accomplishments, the hustle and bustle that filled their children's lives, only made them realize how uneventful their own were. The promotions and raises were reminders that the parent was no longer useful or needed. "My life isn't nearly as full," the aging parent thought. My child is now self-sufficient and even better off than I am. They don't need my food or my money. I don't even have anything to talk about. The thing they most wanted was to feel important and needed. They didn't realize how all-important their affection and approval still were. Instead, the child's recitation made them feel that they had less and less to give. Not that every parent suffers such humiliations. But many do. And the general sense of uselessness can be a source of great depression. Time-dollar programs help to counter this. They permit all participants to define themselves as having something to give, to make a difference in the life of another. Participants in the time-dollar program mention this often. An example is Ray Hughes, the retired merchant seaman. Hughes isn't the type of person one would expect to find in a group of home care volunteers. But he works with members whose problems are especially severe, and he speaks with honest self-awareness and insight. My first client had emphysema, Hughes recounts. He was stuck in one room, couldn't go out. He was very lonely. We found a common ground: ships. He worked in the Navy Yard. I could help him. And in doing so, I helped me. When you give to somebody, you get so much in return. It keeps you young. You want to keep going. This is a reason that Elderplan lets members like Hughes use time dollars to pay part of their HMO fee. When people are feeling active and needed, they are less prone to disease, so they require less care from the HMO. It works a little like a health insurance discount for non-smokers. Lead a healthy life and your insurance will cost less. Hughes, Peters and Gochal have gone through a special peer counseling course that Elderplan runs to help the most committed time-dollar workers deal with severe emotional problems of other members. The course met for 10 weeks, 3 hours twice a week, and there are regular monthly seminars. The peer counselors have some of the esprit of an elite corps, and they take an obvious pride in their work. Peter's first client, as she calls them proudly, was a woman who was schizophrenic. The woman liked to play Scrabble, by her own rules, making up her own words. She had beautiful white hair, but she couldn't manage it. Peters took this woman to the beauty parlor for the first time in 20 years. It cheered her up no end. Now she's working with a woman with a very bad heart, who was never more than a few feet away from her pills. The woman sits alone for most of the day and is very depressed. Peters has been visiting the woman for 4 months, and now she is starting to paint and to take occasional strolls down the block to the luncheonette for tea. Who wouldn't feel good? And for a woman who had to work most of her life, the peer counseling program provides other satisfactions as well. Before I got involved in this, there were times I was lonely, she says. Peters also helps run a folk dance group. Now I am very happy. It is like continuing education. Today we learned relaxation and pressure points. We practiced on one another. It's wonderful. Peters, Hughes, and the others conceivably could get the same satisfaction from a conventional volunteer program, without the time dollars. But time dollars, and the underlying dynamic of reciprocal exchange, add something that conventional volunteer programs do not have. For one thing, the time bank dynamic provides a big boost for staff, and this enthusiasm pervades the whole program. At a time when most people in social service work are overseeing the triage of their programs, people at Elderplan feel they are just getting going. From the staff point of view, it is very exciting to be on the cutting edge of an idea with very solid appeal, and that can start to make the world a little bit better, says Raphael, whose mother has been pioneering the peer counseling concept in California. But the main impact is on the members. For them, The Time Bank takes away the stigma of charity. Elderplan members who receive help are undertaking an obligation to repay the help if they can. Ordinarily, most people are reluctant to ask for help, Bleck says. But when I tell them they can do something to help someone else, it makes them feel better about asking for what they need. Even housebound seniors can help another member, if only through telephone reassurance, a simple phone call to chat and make sure things are okay. One elder partner lost both his legs and was confined to a wheelchair. But he did a lot of work at the member-to-member office and telephone reassurance at home. He was very active until the time of his death, Raphael says. Time dollars also boost the status of these workers within the organization. Volunteers in typical programs are the lowest people on the ladder. They are considered expendable and often no one takes them seriously. Time dollar workers, by contrast, are not extra, they are real workers, whose work is taken seriously. They speak to assemblies of new members and meet with journalists and other visitors. This has included a delegation from Poland that was exploring time dollars as a way to combine free market dynamics with caring work. Beyond all this is the simple fact that people who have never done volunteer work before sign up for member-to-member. Even members have trouble articulating why the reciprocal exchange aspect is attractive. It seems to have something to do with belonging to an organization that functions something like a family. This much can be said for sure, the attraction is not the time dollars themselves as a material reward. When it first started to recruit members, Elderplan stressed the value of the credits and providing for a rainy day. But people didn't like to be reminded that one day they might become disabled and infirm. So Elderplan took a leaf from the insurance industry, which figured out long ago, as Raphael points out, that they had to present their product as life instead of death insurance. So now, the leaders talk about the good feelings and personal growth. Almost universally, the time dollar workers echo this view. It's good to have the credits, but that wasn't part of the reason for volunteering, Coach Hall says. I just wanted to start doing something. I'm enjoying myself now. Peters, never without viewpoint to express, was even more emphatic. When the delegation from Poland came to visit, she advised them to forget the notion that people can only respond to market incentives. If you want to start this program in your country, she said, the basis of it should be that you want to help somebody. Then the other benefits will grow out of that. Herbie Fine, a star worker, a patient man, Herbie Fine keeps a small clipboard by the telephone in the kitchen of his Brooklyn apartment. On it are names and telephone numbers, written in Fine's rounded, somewhat shaky hand, Mr. Branca, whose wife of 50 years died recently, Mr. Baumgarten, whose health problems are legion, Mr. Goldwasser, whom Fine is going to see today. These names have been changed. Fine is one of Elderplan's star-time dollar workers, and the people on the list by his telephone are other members that he's helped. They give me the oldies, he says proudly. They say no one else can handle them. I'm a patient man. Fine also represents a resource that the nation has in growing abundance, the time of retired people who are able and want to be useful. And beyond them, the time of others the conventional workplace doesn't need or want. This resource has never existed before to the extent it does now. And due to our way of economic thinking, we don't know what to do with it. The experts in Washington keep harping on economic incentives and rewards. But Herbie Fine isn't interested in those. Elderplan offers to reimburse time dollar workers for transportation costs, but Fine won't take it. Often he doesn't even report his hours. Partly, it is a question of pride. Fine worked hard all his life. He earned his pension. And he's not about to grovel for a few dollars now. I'm not looking to get something in return, he says. I believe in the old school. In Europe, the rabbi never got paid. Then why does he work in a time dollar program, when he's never volunteered for anything else? To Fine, the time dollars credited to him are less a reward than they are strands in a network of care. What is member to member, he says. It's helping one another out. Like a family. I would be a lousy doctor, he adds. I wouldn't charge anybody anything. I'd say call me anytime. My name is Fine. I want to keep it fine. If I do something for somebody, I feel good. Fine's apartment is neat but somber, lacking the warm touches that would suggest a woman's presence. Fine's wife died more than 20 years ago, and he has lived alone here ever since. There are family pictures on a table and a white yarmulke that shows signs of recent use. But Fine doesn't talk much about religion, recoils from any display of virtue. The whole thing is ask what you can do for your country, not what your country can do for you, he says. Wasn't there a president who said that? Fine lives in the Orthodox Jewish enclave of Borough Park, where the tree-lined streets have the odd atmosphere of a comfortable American shtetl, or enclave. People call him mayor of the building because he's always helping out. When we call, there is always somebody there, says Black, of Elderplan. When he comes to the office, he brings cake or sweet rolls. He gives. He's a giving person. His first case was Arnold Baumgarten, a wealthy man in his 90s, who did not part easily with a dime. Baumgarten was a legend around Elderplan for his demands on volunteers. He would call with his complaints at all hours of the day and night, issue demands seemingly without end. Most volunteers begged off within a week or so. As a last resort, Elderplan gave Baumgarten to Fine. The demands continued. Herbie had to take 3 buses to get to Baumgartner's apartment. Yet Baumgartner would insist that he stop at Waldbaum's supermarket on the way over. Prices were too high at the market near his house, he said. He called frequently in the early hours, and Fine would take him to the hospital at 2 o'clock or 3 a.m. Once Fine spent all night with Baumgarten in a hospital emergency room. A problem with his stomach, Fine says delicately. He couldn't go. The problem became a major undertaking over the next several months. Trips to the doctor. Calls late at night. Then one morning the phone rang at 3 o'clock a.m. It was Baumgarten. Herbie, he says. I got good news for you. I did beautiful business. Eventually, Elderplan got a paid helper for Baumgarten, though he wanted Fine back. But Fine holds no regrets for his 2 years with the demanding gentleman. I figure I'm going to get old like that, too, he says. It's my job to take care of him. When he called to tell me he did some business, I was very happy. He's showing me how much he likes me. He wants me to be part of his glory. Like most members of Elderplan, Fine grew up in a world in which ties of family and community were much stronger than they are today. He was born in Lithuania, in the second decade of the century. His family came to the United States around 1920 and settled in Hammond, Indiana, where his father opened a grocery store. The senior Fine was a religious man who spent most of his time studying Torah. So Herbie helped in the grocery and went to work in a department store as soon as he was old enough to send his brother through college. Until the day I got married, I gave my father my pay envelope, he says. I believe it should be that way. After World War II, Herbie settled in Brooklyn, where his wife was raised. He wanted to go back to Chicago, but his wife wanted to be close to her family. She started crying. "I hate people crying. I can't stand it." On the basis of a little experience in a home darkroom, he talked his way into a job as a developer of movies and into a union that usually didn't admit Jews. He worked 2-3 jobs to send his daughter through Hebrew school and college. This didn't leave any time for organized volunteer work, apart from his informal attentions to neighbors and friends. Fine almost didn't make it as a service credit worker. Like most programs, Elderplan trains these workers before sending them into people's homes, and Fine fell asleep during all of the sessions. But he aced the written test at the end, and now he's one of the most active members. He's had more boychicks than just about anyone, Bleck says. Boychick is a Yiddish term of affection for a young man or an old friend. Fine uses it where a professional social worker would use the term client or case. His current boychick is Hyman Goldwasser, 95 years old, an Orthodox Jew whose dietary observance is very strict. He won't let Fine shop for him for fear he'll slip something that isn't kosher into the bag, so he buys his own food. "It's hard to get hold of that son of a gun," Fine says in his gentle Brooklynese. "He's always running around." This day, Fine is walking with a hesitant shuffle, his face is a bit tight. He is a small man with a sad face and gentle blue eyes and trousers that tied up high on his belly. Fine favors a sporty look, black vinyl jacket, baseball cap, and white sneakers. The sneakers are not tied, but this is not to fit in with the teenagers on the subway. His feet are swollen from diabetes, and he's been fighting a losing battle with his waistline. "I'm a nosher," he shrugs, if he's in pain, though, he keeps it to himself. A pretty smart baby. When Fine arrives at Goldwasser's apartment, the latter is sitting at the table of his narrow kitchen, reading a Hebrew newspaper with a magnifying glass. He is a spry little man whose large ears and nose give him the appearance of an elfin rabbi. In fact, he is a chazan, a man who leads the prayers, in his synagogue. On one wall are pictures from a special party to celebrate his longevity in the temple. Goldwasser wears thermal underwear under a white shirt and a black yarmulke over limp strands of hair. He is sharp and alert, though talking with him can seem at times like shouting down a long tunnel. Fine is gentle with Goldwasser, almost paternal. There is close to 20 years difference between the two, and in this setting, Fine becomes the young man. With his vocabulary he brings Goldwasser back into the stream of life and makes him one of the guys. "He's a pretty smart baby," he says. "He's been in all sorts of business." Goldwasser was born in Poland, in the 1890s. After 2 years in the Polish army during World War I, he lived on potatoes and vegetables because the Poles wouldn't provide kosher food. He came to the United States in 1921. "It was quite a few days ago," he says with a twinkle. "I didn't have a trade in my hands. I was studying to be a rabbi." So he worked a pushcart on Orchard Street, got a small grocery store, scraped together enough to enable his sons to become a lawyer and a surgeon, one of the best, he says. The family pictures are in the living room, and Goldwasser invites his visitors to take a look. The room is surprisingly tidy, except for shirts that hang from various perches. But Goldwasser has forgotten something: the lights don't work. The bulbs in the chandelier blew out, and he couldn't get up on a chair to change them. Like many older people, Goldwasser holds tightly to his shreds of self-reliance. He'd rather suffer job-like than ask for help. And whom does one call for such a job anyway? The police? "I can take care of myself so far," he says. "God gives me help." The light bulbs are exactly the sort of daily problem that bedevils older people who try to live at home. As much as ill health, the accumulation of these can drive people into nursing homes. Fine keeps watch over the little things. When Goldwasser had a roach problem, he fitted him out with roach motels. Fine, we got him on Medicaid. And he tries to provide little treats, such as an ice cream cone, Goldwasser's first in 20 years. Today he's concerned about Goldwasser's eyes. Goldwasser has a cataract problem, but he doesn't want to go to the doctor. The doctors now, they only know what they learned from the books, he says. Probably, he just doesn't want to submit himself to a doctor, period. Or maybe he just wants a little attention. Fine understands, and gently urges Goldwasser along. Fine, I'm going to make an appointment for you, for the eyes. Goldwasser, you know what they told me to do to cure the eyes? They told me to use Johnson's baby shampoo. I ask you, is that for the hair or for the eyes? Goldwasser shakes his finger like a rabbi making a point of Torah. But Fine persists with a light, good-humor touch. All right, it can't hurt, Goldwasser says at last. It is hard to imagine a younger person, a social worker, achieving this kind of rapport. The two talk about Torah, talk about the old days. Fine is old enough to remember, but still young enough to help. I have a friend better than a brother, Goldwasser says. A brother, a sister, they wouldn't do what Mr. Fine does for me. He encourages me to live, for life. And, of course, God in heaven helps, too. And Fine, who also lives alone, can understand the little daily needs. The thermos, for example. Talmudic law prohibits the lighting of fires on the Sabbath, which includes the lighting of stoves. Younger adherents finesse the situation by putting a pot of water on a burner before the Sabbath, and keeping it over a very low flame. This is not a good idea for people in their 90s, however, so Goldwasser passes the holy day without soup or anything warm to drink. He bought a thermos a while back, but it wasn't a good one, and he became frustrated and gave up. Fine has been aware of the problem for months. But it's not easy getting Goldwasser to accept help. Finally, Fine resorted to a little fib. He told Goldwasser that he had bought a thermos for himself to take to work, but has no use for it since he retired. I'll have to throw it out, he said. So do me a favor and use it. Today, Fine has brought the thermos. It has a carrying case and a nice wide mouth, to make pouring easy for a shaky hand, another concern that older people understand. After a few passes, Goldwasser grasps how the lid fits onto the mouth. For me? He asks, his voice high-pitched like a child's. This is for me? His eyes start to water, but Fine rises quickly to the occasion. No tears now, he says, just a bit gruffly. I'm just a friend,